Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute podcast, and I am your host, Supreme Decisions. And today, I'm going to get into something that I consider probably rather boring, but as you know, got to pay a couple bills. Today's episode is brought to everyone by That Burger Spot number 3. It's 7420A South Lake Parkway, Jonesboro, Georgia, 30236. That Burger Spot. Your stomach will thank you. Don't forget to tell them Supreme sent you. We're going to Urban Gyro. Urban Gyro's Mediterranean street food. We have your gyros, we have your bowls, we have your loaded fries. And that's El Paso's new favorite, big ass taco. Hashtag celebrate flavor. Made fresh daily and made to order. And it's at 1550 North Zaragoza Drive, Suite 202, El Paso, Texas, 79936. And lastly, we have Jacob's Well Unity Church of Christ. Their Sunshine Community Outreach Dinner every third Sunday at 2 p.m., and it's at 241 Bradford Drive, and this is in Charlotte, North Carolina, 28208. And just for a quick shout out, I've been looking at the news, don't know why, but I hope everyone out there is very safe. And if you are safe, stop in at 2 p.m. every third Sunday at Jacob's Well Unity Church of Christ for their Sunshine Community Outreach Dinner. Now we got the bills out the way. It's time to get to business. Well, I actually, you almost shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I actually like watching Tommy Sotomayor because a lot of times most people, they get hung up in semantics. And the thing is, yesterday I was watching, and there was a question that was asked, and I was like, oh my God, I need to call in. But it's one of those things that was brought up about the Senate Bill 202 and the Georgia Voter ID Bill. Now, we've been watching it, and a lot of people have been wondering, what is the uproar? What's the big thing? They're just saying, hey, get an ID. That's it. Well, how is getting an ID equivalent to Jim Crow? And just to be clear, that's the question. Why is Senate Bill 202 considered racist or even an act towards Jim Crow? Now, I'm going to give you something because oftentimes you hear me speak about the war is on the poor. We're looking at what's the big deal, right? And as I go through this, if you have any questions, leave it in the comment section. Shoot me a quick email, greatestnow@yahoo.com. And that, again, is greatestnow@yahoo.com. Because, again, I love to see and read, some of the things that come across. But it also allows me to understand what people are thinking whenever they're seeing this, because I understand the greatest context of most of this. Because the question that was asked yesterday was simply, how is this relating to Jim Crow? How is this something that affects blacks? Because the bill, well, actually, let me read what I wrote down. That might be better because that's more directly to how the question was asked, so it'll make a little bit more sense. The Georgia Voter ID Bill. How this bill goes directly to voter suppression of minorities and the poor. Now, when you're talking about it, the words Jim Crow come up, and all of us know, that's one of the things that America wants to overlook, the ideal or even the existence that Jim Crow was once here and pretty much still alive, and especially operating well in Georgia. Because just like my guy Manson said, they don't call you slaves anymore, they call you criminals. But here's why you look at Senator Park Cannon when she was arrested simply for asking Kemp, why are you signing it in secret? Now, you often hear me talk about the simple things of if they're the good guy, why are they hiding it? If they're doing what's right, why are they keeping it from everyone else? If it's a good thing, why are you not wanting support for it? Why are you not wanting the notoriety for it, for the most part? If it's a good thing for the people, because that's what you say you're acting for, on behalf of the people. Now, the other day I did Blue Line accountability, and I spoke about things that most people don't even come in contact with. And then I even spoke about a few stars that actually become collateral damage because of our current policing system. But we also have to understand that because even if you guys didn't remember, I even said that the context of the system, how it's laid out, actually came from Tommy Sotomayor when he spoke about the people, the police, the prosecutor, the defense, and the judges. Now, he didn't go in as much depth as I did because that's not his thing. That's not what he speaks about. However, he did. That's where I got that from. But what you have to do is understand where else is that going. Because the police are only enacting the things that the senators, the governors, the mayors are making available when they're putting into code, what they're putting into supposedly for the protection of the people, because they're saying this is what the people want. This is what the people are speaking up for. So this is what we want from the people as an enactment. So when you sign a bill in secret that people perceive to be something that suppresses or even takes us back to a time of not being able to vote, it then becomes the question of why, and even the context of even how. The context of how is the rancid thing at this moment, because most people, like I said, don't understand the context of things. Because I told everybody before I came out here to Texas, I lived most of my life in Atlanta and over different parts of Georgia. And most of the stories I had regarding my police encounters for the people here, that was stuff they just saw on TV. So whenever you hear guys that are affluent or have been disconnected from police interaction for an elongated period of time, it does become one of those like, how do I know? That doesn't even seem real. That looks like something or sounds like something that can't be done, because we're thinking that things are supposed to be done a certain way and we're expecting those things to be done that way. So now here's the thing, because before I even get deep into that, I want you to also understand Florida has passed a similar bill, and I believe it was done last week, to the bill from Kemp, which was in March. And I want to start off with a story, because I understand why this sounds strange. Now I'm going to give you kind of a marker, and then we're going to go forward. Well, that marker is, at one point, me and my grandmother, she had a house that was big enough that pretty much housed 2 apartments. She lived in one part, I lived in another with my family. Now, technically, we share the same address, right? We went and got our IDs pretty much at the same time. The funniest part about it was we had 2 different polling places for the exact same address. I thought that was funny as shit until it was time for me to go vote. I was told I was at the wrong polling place. However, my voter's registration card that comes in the mail had me at that place. But I wasn't on that roll. Why? Because my address wasn't correct. But then my grandmother, she went to her place and they told her she couldn't vote because her name on her voter's registration card, which is part of the voter registration roll, did not match her ID. Now, simple enough, because most people, mistakes happen, things happen, because again, human error. People rush, do kind of crazy stuff. But I want you to understand the context of it. At the time, we lived in a low-income area. Because again, how often or how strange is it for most of us to live or cohabitate pretty much in the same place, even as adults, as our parents or even our grandparents for an elongated period of time? Well, low-income areas, that's pretty much the norm. You know, it's not strange to see 2 or 3 generations of people living in one house, especially if the house is big enough. And this was the case at this moment. Eventually, we were able to vote because, you know, people had to do this and do little things or whatever. But here's where that bill comes in. And note what I'm saying to you. Because the bill that was signed by Kemp in secret invalidates provisional ballots cast in the wrong precinct. So technically, if that bill was alive back in, I believe that was 2000, if that bill was functioning in 2000, my vote nor my grandmother's vote would have even counted. Through no mistake of our own. Both of us had IDs. Both of us had our registration card. Our registration cards, we followed the instructions to the T. But according to this bill, at that point, because her name was misspelled, she couldn't vote there. But because it had the wrong precinct for me, I couldn't vote there. We had same address, 2 different polling places, name misspelled, but the provisions of the ballots cast in the wrong precinct. And there's something else that also happens in lower income areas. Because most of us don't even think about these little things. Why? Because we've gone to vote, had no issue. So we go into the, well, that doesn't affect me type thing. But what happens to the people that it does affect? Simple mistakes, simple clerical errors makes it invalidating for you to cast a vote. What if you wasn't a felon? What if you were legally, as far as it's stated, you legally had the right to vote? But because of this, clerical errors. Remember, my voter registration card, the card they give me, the card they give me instructions for, the card that they issue, told me where to go, but it was wrong. Their information for me was wrong. So according to this provision, my vote would not have counted. Now, the second part of that is she went to the right place. Her name wasn't the same as it was on the voter registration card. Now, not a big deal, but she would have had her vote not count, even though she was at the right place. And just like I said, the second part of this that happens in low-income areas is going to the wrong table for places that serve multiple precincts. Now, did I go to a place that served multiple precincts? No. Did my grandmother go to a place that served multiple precincts? No. But when you live in certain zip codes aren't allotted a whole bunch of funding. So guess what they can't do? They can't secure places for that actual voting. Because even if you remember in Houston, there were a lot of pop-up places for the most part because they were set up in tents. There were makeshifts for votings because, one, we had a pandemic. And this actually comes from Shelby County v. Holder. Now, there are other aspects that came from this, but this is a direct ruling from 2013 from Shelby County v. Holder, where it invalidated places where you go to the wrong table because, again, it's a low-income area. You might have 4 or 5, even as many as 6 precincts in one place with no real direction. Why? Because most people there are volunteers. And the second part of that is most of those people are there just for that day and don't know a whole lot of what's going on. Because you have the mindset of, oh, I'm in charge. Oh, no, you're in charge. And everybody wants to have a title to give directions. And even those directions can be misconstrued, even if they're simple. Because what I found out is most adults cannot follow instructions. They can't follow simple directions. And it's the funniest thing in the world to me. But even those simple mistakes, honest mistakes, what happens then? This is one of those, again, it's the attack on the poor. Now, if you live in an affluent area, you're not going to have this issue. And when I mean affluent, most times if you make more, you and your wife or you and your husband or whatever, you and your partner make more than $40,000 a year and you live in a decent residential area, you're probably not going to run into these issues. So who am I talking about? Who gets affected by this? Because you look at, in Georgia, you're looking at 7 million, I think it was 7.4 million qualified voters, right? And that was, I believe it was 2016. That number, I believe, grew to about 12 million qualified voters. That doesn't mean they're eligible. Qualified and eligible are two different things. 5 million of those that were in 2016 were technically ineligible. Ineligible? I think I pronounced that correctly. But they were ineligible simply because they had been charged with a felony. And I'm going to get deeper into that as well because we talked about the system itself, the people, the police, the prosecutor, the defense, and the judges. And I spoke about last week, the most important part of that is the people. The problem is the people don't even fight back. And those that do fight back a lot of times do it in the wrong place. They don't do where it counts, which is in a courtroom. Because less than 5% of people that are charged with anything ever fight back, which creates this problem. But now let me go back. Because again, another part of this is those who move before an election. Now, I actually brought this up because it was one of those things that I actually thought it was kind of interesting because I looked at it and I thought of my own situation. I went from one part of Texas to another part of Texas, and then the world shut down. So I no longer had a quote-unquote polling place simply because my location had changed. But now, how do I vote? And then how is my vote even counted? Because displacement during the pandemic, travel was restricted. Where I went to, it's 10 hours away. So can't just jump back on a plane. Why? Because the planes weren't flying. So I had to sit and make my life somewhere else for, 8 months out the year. But that also changed how I voted or how my eligibility to vote was. So now when you're looking at this, who does that affect? Because most people are, again, that are poor. They generally don't live in any place more than 6-8 months. Some stretch it out a year. But the majority are constantly changing places, changing address, changing zip codes. How do I vote now? Because most voting requirements of at least 6 months in one spot. But what if I get there and I'm only at 5.5 months by the day of the election? I'm ineligible to vote. But what if I use my old address? Well, technically, I have to go to my old polling place. What if that place is completely different? So again, these things come up. Now, say, oh, okay, well, no, this doesn't affect the affluent. Yeah, it affects the affluent, but not at the same rate. Because whether we like it or not, the whole point of this was the constant look at what it changed. What changed in 2020 that required this bill to go in as much depth as it did? Because it's 93 pages. It is 93 pages of repetitive BS. But again, I also understand it's from those that are on the outside looking in. How can this be a certain way if it doesn't affect me? But that goes back to why I talk about my content. Most people that listen to me, most people that watch me, they're not watching because they're learning. They're watching and learning because it is affecting me right now. What about those that it hasn't affected yet? What if you're in one of these similar situations? Because even in one of the effects, because during the pandemic, this was also one of the questions that was brought up. Why? Because if your polling place has been closed, what happens then? Because now you have a place with multiple tables that's representing multiple precincts and very little instructions or direction. Then what? If your polling place is closed, which happened a lot in 2020, it made it more difficult for people to actually vote, even if they were eligible. And I put it that way because a lot of people, oh, well, they want to let the illegal aliens. Well, what illegal alien has an ID? Because it actually amazes people, because I tell people how basically I move around a lot without an ID. Nobody cares. Because at the end of the day, all they care about is money. So when we even talk about the Florida bill actually allows felons, as long as they cut a check, if they pay them money, they can vote. They're literally, if you pay me, you can vote. I don't know how else I can say it's just about revenue generation and also the suppression of other issues. Because if we're going to lose on one end, we're going to gain on another. I understand it because it's a business practice. But the most common of all these, because again, this is just to answer a question. How this bill goes directly to voter suppression of minorities and the poor. Why Kemp signed this bill in secret? Why was Senator Park Cannon arrested? Why is this being related to Jim Crow? I even spoke about it in my story. Mistakes made by the state. You know, something simple as two people at the same address have different polling places. How is that possible? A name misspelled on a voter roll. How is that possible? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because the easy question is, how is the voter registration roll created? I'm pretty sure most of us know that. Because they get a copy of your birth certificate, they get a copy of your social security card, and then do what? They create your driver's license because they also get a bill of a place of residence. Because the voter's registration roll is created when you get an ID. Whoops. So if your name on your birth certificate is spelled one way, your social security card is spelled the exact same way, your driver's license is spelled the exact same way, how is it my grandmother, who's been on this earth 60 plus years, 70 plus years, how is her name misspelled on her voter registration card? If everything they have to create that card comes from something that has it spelled one way, which is the way it's spelled on her ID. If they create it from the things that create your ID, how is it misspelled? Because those are reasons, because remember, it invalidated provisional ballots cast with these mistakes. It invalidates your vote. Now, that doesn't mean a lot because mistakes happen. Well, I'm going to give you a name. Sharkeese Twankavia Johnson. There's not a person alive that can spell that correctly. Probably not going to find two people that'll spell it the same. However, it'll probably be on their birth certificate, their social security card, and their ID that they've gotten, which created this card. But guess what it's not going to be on? Their voter registration card. Because here's the greatest part. Because I actually have a friend. Well, shit, I can actually just use my friend's name is Terrence. Pretty straightforward. Terrence. The problem is, it's spelled with one R and not two. Spelled with two E's, or is it? No, it's spelled with an E and an A somewhere in there. But it's Terrence. It's on his birth certificate, it's on his social security card. He's had two issues. He's lived in the same house for 30 years, literally. It was only the last two elections he didn't have any issues. He's been in the same place for 30 years, literally. He's had issues voting. He's actually been issued 3 separate precincts from the exact same address. He's been denied voting multiple times. Why? Because they misspelled Terrence. That's not even a crazy name, as most people say. But who does that affect more often? Minorities. Like, it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. So when you ask, how does this bill reflect directly to Jim Crow? Who does this bill affect the most? Because even with me, when you're doing an absentee ballot, they're requiring that you also send in an enlarged ID. Not that you're sending in the ID of like you holding it or something. No, you have to send in an ID that matches the name that's on the voters. But again, it goes through a whole process. Even if you're displaced. So those are the things that are set forth in stone and that they're using or weaponizing against people. This is how that bill becomes, for lack of a better term, Jim Crow-like, because of who it's aimed at. It's not aimed at the affluent. It is aimed at minorities and the poor. Because again, these areas where these are going to affect the most are low-income areas. Low income means right at or below the poverty level. Most people that are going through these issues, while most people don't think about that, that's 80% of America. 80% of Americans make less than $40,000. That's a huge number. So that means a great portion of those that are voting are going to go through these issues. Am I saying everybody that votes is going to hell no? That would be stupid. But if I'm not in those low-income areas, not rural is different, but low income, it's the reason why they call it project housing. It's the reason why they call it low-income areas. Or in Atlanta, instead of low income, they use high crime. All these code words for voter suppression. Now, I'm being silly, but at the end of the day, this is why. These are the answers to that question. Because again, all these seem innocent, but most of these are directed by the people who control it. I'm going to say this again. All of these are directed by the people who control it, which make it weaponized. And you have these police officers like Cody Griggers of Wilkinson County. Cody Griggers of Wilkinson County, former police officer. Whoops, you remember the good guys, the guys we should trust, the guys that do the right thing. If you don't commit any crimes, they won't bother you. Cody Griggers. He's on a recording saying he's going to charge blacks with felonies so they can't vote. Why? Because he knows 95% of people will not fight back. His intention is to go out and just flat out charge someone with the felony. He ain't worried about proof because he knows there's no fight in you. So when you're going out and you're telling someone, oh, you have a felony, you can't vote. You've been charged with a felony, you can't vote. Because in Georgia, that's pretty much it. If you've been charged with a felony, well, we got to see what's going to happen on that because you got a felony. North Carolina, they have literally locked up people and requested prison time and used that as leverage to get these people to plea so they can give up their voting rights. I'm going to say that one more time. In North Carolina, they have literally weaponized it to charge people and use prison as leverage to get them to plea to give up their voting rights. And I'm not going to tell you the skin tone of the people that they did this to because it almost becomes redundant at this time. Florida has charged folks with voting issues. Georgia has charged folks and have given people more time for voting. Say that one more. They've given people more time for voting than they have people that have actually killed someone. Yes, I pause for dramatic effect because I want you to understand what it is I'm doing and saying. I want you to think about it. You get more time for actually exercising. You get more time for actually exercising. You get more time for actually exercising your right to vote than someone taking a life. Gotta love Georgia. Because I even went off on what? Victor Hill. Victor Hill had done multiple heinous things. He was only charged with 4 counts. He's still walking around. People that he's trained still in their trained positions. They're still carrying out his orders. Because here's the thing. The simple fact is, the bill that's set out as it's written, as it stands unchallenged in any court at this moment, it is simply taking away your right to have your vote counted. It is taking away the right for the people to be heard. Because the lowest of the low still should have an opportunity to be heard. A charge does not make a person what people say they are. The perception which they want you to delve in is not most people's reality. Because a lot of people think they have to like me or like the message or like my background in order for me to actually speak on the things that are pretty much here. You can't talk about the things that you see. because you're not a good guy. You are a felon. You've been charged with a felony. You've been charged with acts of terrorism. You've been charged with all this other actions. But nobody's saying that I'm wrong. And the ones that are saying I'm wrong, they don't post what's right. Because then they have to stand on it. Because then they have to stand on it. Because then they have to stand on it. Because the difference between, I was like, I am going to do it. Most people don't understand the context of leadership. Most people don't understand the ideals of what it is to be a leader. You hear people, oh, I'm a bad bitch. Oh, I'm a boss. I posted up a couple years ago on Instagram, simple thing, and it was a lion. He had blood all over his face. And he said sometimes a king has to show a clown why they're king. Because kings and queens do king and queen shit. Because they're not doing things for themselves. They're doing it for the whole. And that's why bad only describes a bitch. Because even the Bible spoke about a bitch, because a bitch will tear down everything around her with her hands. A queen builds. That's why most women don't understand the context. And it's one of the things that's not being preached of becoming a daughter of Sarah. And most men are not being taught how to actually be a man and being fearful or guided. Because when you sit down and you think of it, a king makes hard decisions. Why? Because he's not trying to just benefit him. He's trying to benefit his kingdom. Because even my son, I had a conversation with him. And it was funny. He was 16 years old. And he looks at me and we're watching some TV show and we're in the man cave. He goes, Dad, we need to do that. And I was like, what's that? He said, we should be friends like that. And I told him, I said, no, dude, I'll never be your friend. I said, because I'm going to be your father in every situation. I said, because I can't give you friend advice. Why? Because at every moment, in every instant of his life, I am not stepping off my throne. I will not ever abdicate the throne to anyone for any reason other than death. Because while I am alive, I am king. I'm the one that has to make the hard decision. I am the one that has to be I have to be liked and disliked at the same time. And I have to be okay with it. That's the definition of leadership. When someone will actually step out and make a choice and stand by their decision, that's boss shit. Not just typing stupid shit on a keyboard just to say something or name calling because I can't think. Or I'm too lazy to find. Any clown can do that. That's why the title itself is relegated to those who actually earned it. Because whenever I used to put it on the end of the podcast, Muhammad Ali said, I'm going to show you how great I am. Most people have no idea when he said that. He wasn't heavyweight champion then. When he said it, he wasn't heavyweight. He wasn't even Muhammad then. I'm going to show you how great I am. Once he won it, he told you before he ever became it, I am the greatest. He believed it. He went out and walked as the greatest. We now cherish him as the greatest. When I played it, it was to show you, I'm going to show you how great I am. Because I've earned everything that I say. I'm willing to stand on everything that I say. Because you also have to understand something. when we're sitting here and we're asking these questions, my job isn't just to give you information. My job isn't just to bring something to light. It's to offer you guidance. And those that are willing to be guided are the ones that are tested. You're given the opportunity to earn it. Earning comes in many different ways because now you get an opportunity to exercise it. Because remember, when I talk about these things, with everything that we're doing, with every light that I shine, I'm also letting you know it's okay to let your light shine too. Supreme Decisions, out.